Let's get into this coming weekend. UFC Fight Night, Volkov versus Rozenstruik. We're not going to review or preview every single bout on this card. We're obviously going to talk about the main event, co-main, and a few others. Before we get into the ones that we have already on our slate to talk about, are there any other fights or fighters that you guys just want to highlight, spotlight for our listeners and viewers? Just say, hey, watch this fight, watch this fighter this coming weekend. Mark, you got a name for us?
Yeah, so I'll mention a few, unless Omar, if you got one and want to go first in case I steal your one.
Yeah, the only one I guess it would really be on my list that I'm just kind of looking out for is Alonzo Metafield. That's it. I know I've enjoyed watching him. I don't know what his record is off the top of my head. He lost his last fight. And he's been a little up and down. He looks like he's sort of like in the 50-50 range. But he's a fun fighter to watch. Just hopefully he kind of gets one on his side this time.
Yeah, so I'll tell you something interesting about that matchup. So, yeah, I agree about Metafield. He's a fun guy to watch. Obviously, he has a win over Paul Craig in the UFC, which is a pretty big win at this point. But he is up and down, has a couple losses where maybe he shouldn't have lost. But so the guy he's fighting is a debuting fighter, kind of a guy who goes for like the KO from the jump. So I actually think that might be a crazy fight because I feel like Metafield can get suckered into that type of fight also. So maybe one to watch. But the interesting thing is that this guy he's fighting supposedly has a ton of controversy around him because he has changed his name a couple times to try to act like he is not the same fighter who was losing early in his career so that he could have like this sexier record and people caught him. So like, I guess he is good now. Like his recent record is good and obviously he's earned getting to the UFC. But I guess for a while there, he was losing a bunch of fights and tried a couple times to change his name and like act like he wasn't the same guy. And he had people on his team calling like things like Sure Dog and Tapology and being like, no, like you have a fight on here. I never fought this fight, so on and so on. So like pretty fucking sketchy stuff. So I'm rooting for Alonzo Metafield here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah, pretty wild. But yeah, I'll tell you a couple more. So one also on the main card is Pollyanna Bottellio fighting Karine Silva. I think it's Karine. I'm not sure how she says her first name, but she's the debuting fighter here, and she seems to be a true prospect. She's a dangerous grappler, which has kind of been Bottellio's kryptonite thus far, so she may get a debut in here, but she's one to watch. And then another maybe lower level than some of the other fights. Like there's guys on here like Mike Trezano's on this card who are not going to dive into his fight. Joe Selecki, same deal. Like these are legit guys. We'll see what they do. But I'll point out Benoit Saint-Denis, who we watched take an ungodly beating in his debut at the hands of Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos in a fight that could have been stopped about 800 times. And he would not go away and kept cracking dos Santos like late in that fight. And he's back for his second fight now on this card against Nicholas Stolze. So I am interested to see him simply because of the heart that he had in his debut. So we'll see what he does here.
Nice. All right. Well, let us hop into the first fight that we're going to talk about. Opening up the entire fight night, going down in the women's flyweight division. Erin Blanchfield, Jersey's own, taking on J.J. Aldrich. Blanchfield looking really good in her past few fights. She's riding a 5-fight win streak. Of course, most recently getting a big win over other top prospect Miranda Maverick. And J.J. Aldrich, of course, also bringing in 3 wins of her own into the octagon this Saturday night. Most recently taking out Jillian Robertson. Omar, let me throw it over to you first. What is your take on this women's flyweight matchup?
Yeah, these girls were both scrappy, which is, I think, the one thing I'm really interested about this fight. Jillian Robertson, if there's one thing you can say about Jillian Robertson is that she's a girl that doesn't go away easily. She's not the most skilled fighter in the world, but she's definitely very difficult to kind of run over. And J.J. Aldrich was very, very effective in that fight. Was dominant in that fight as far as I'm concerned. And so I remember after the end of that fight being very excited to see J.J. Aldrich's next fight. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. As far as Blanchfield is concerned, she just beat Miranda Maverick not too long ago at the end of last year. She's another one that's also very scrappy as well. Miranda Maverick has had her ups and her downs, but Blanchfield was the one who you could see in that fight pushing the pedal to kind of push the pace in that fight, where Miranda Maverick kind of let go a little bit. So I'm excited to see this fight. I think it's going to be a very competitive fight. I don't think it'll be one-sided like some of the other fights that they've have been. So I'm excited to see what happens. I think if I had to choose one, I'm going to go with J.J. Aldridge by decision.
Nice. Mark, what's your assessment of Aaron Blanchfield taking on J.J. Aldridge?
So this is a great fight. I'm wildly confused by the UFC's fight placement on this card. Like, to me, outside of the main and co-main, this is the next best fight on the card. And somehow, instead of being the feature fight, it's the opening fight of the entire thing on Fight Pass. So I don't really know what is going on. Or not Fight Pass, ESPN Plus. But anyway, to the fight, Blanchfield is a huge favorite, minus 550. Aldrich is plus 400. Aldrich is a girl that I think a lot of people look past because there's nothing that she necessarily excels at, but she's really well-rounded. Her UFC record is now up to 7-3. She's won 3 in a row. I thought, as Omar said, that her most recent win over Jillian Robertson was particularly impressive for her. And I think it's time that she starts getting some respect on her name. But with that said, she has unfortunately been matched up across Aaron Blanchfield, who is probably the hottest prospect in this division right now outside of Manon Fior. Blanchfield is walking through girls in the UFC thus far. She's 2-0. She's 8-1 overall, and it's really her last fight where she absolutely handled Miranda Maverick.
She did.
That I think made people say, like, oh, wow, this is real. So it's possible that JJ can surprise and stuff some takedowns. She did that against Jillian Robertson when I didn't expect her to, but Blanchfield is a much bigger challenge than Jillian Robertson. She's better on her feet. She's going to set things up better. She's a much better takedown artist. And if Miranda Maverick couldn't stop Blanchfield's takedowns, then I don't really think Aldrich can. And once Blanchfield is on top, her top game is nasty. So I think Aaron Blanchfield has a ton of talent. I think she continues to put it on display in this one. And I think she'll have her way for the most part and roll to a UD.
I love it. I agree. I'm a big Blanchfield fan because I was a big, or still am a big Miranda Maverick fan, and to see what Blanchfield did to Miranda Maverick, I was like, wow, this girl's legit. Also, Aaron Blanchfield from New Jersey trains out of MK Muay Thai, and MK Muay Thai is one of the staple gyms on the East Coast Muay Thai scene. So I've announced quite a few folks from MK Muay Thai. At the most recent event, Aaron Blanchfield was there, and I didn't even know. I saw on social media afterwards people taking pictures with Aaron Blanchfield. She must have been in the crowd. I had no idea.
Damn,
so
could have been best friends. She could have been on the show today.
That's what I'm saying. Next time, I'm gonna look out for her. So shout out to MK Muay Thai. Shout out to Muay Thai champions Marco Matias as well as Ashley Blanco. I've announced both of them a few times and sort of seen them both grow up in the East Coast Muay Thai scene. So maybe Aaron Blanchfield will grace the Muay Thai ring at some point. That would be cool.
Nice.
All right, let's move on to the flyweight division. Jeff El Jefe Molina taking on Jalgas Jumagulov, a.k.a. Jaco. So Jumagulov, of course, very talented guy. Most recently lost at the hands of the very talented Manel Kopp. And the lesser-known Jeff Molina, very impressive, 10-2 as a pro, undefeated in the UFC so far. Has appeared on Dana White's Contender Series. I believe if you count the Contender Series, I believe he's 3-0 in the UFC. In his 10 pro fights, he has 8 finishes. Most recently, he defeated Daniel Lacerda in the UFC. Mark, let me start with you this time first. What's your take on Molina versus Jumagulov?
So fairly tight odds here. Molina is actually favored more than I thought he would be. He's minus 190. Jumagulov is plus 155 as the dog. I like this fight a lot. I think it's kind of flying under the radar. Maybe because Jumagulov is 1-3 in the UFC thus far. But his losses, as you said, are Manel Kopp, Amir Albazi, who's a great prospect right now, and then Raulian Paiva in a fight that was probably a robbery. And prior to joining the UFC, he had won 3 in a row against Tyson Nam, Tagir Ulanbekov, and Ali Bagutinov. So the talent is absolutely there. So I'm very interested to see him stand across the cage as a test for Jeff Molina, who has obviously been very impressive so far, but hasn't quite fought that competition level yet. he's turned heads, I would say, as like an up and coming guy who people maybe didn't expect to be what he has been so far. The guy's a gamer, but this is going to be his most credentialed opponent so far, I would say. And honestly, this is why I'm surprised at the odds, but I'm going to pick Molina in the end here. But I think Jumagulov is probably faster, and I think he's probably the better wrestler. So I think there's a lot in his corner going into this fight. But for some reason, I can't seem to not pick Molina, and I can't even really tell you why. He has this feeling of one of these guys who it's just like clicking for, and you almost expect him to look better every time you see him. Like he just has this it thing, and for whatever reason, I just feel like until I see someone beat him, I'm having a hard time not picking him. So not the most technique analysis you ever heard, but I'm going to go with Jeff Molina until someone stops him. I'll say a decision, competitive fight decision for Molina.
Omar, what's your take?
To add on to kind of what Mark was already saying, Molina is a very scrambly guy. He likes to kind of get into those wild scrambles, and I don't think he's afraid to get on the ground with anybody, regardless of what their wrestling credentials are. It's very possible he gets stuck under this guy's name is going to kill me, Jumagulov. It's very possible he gets stuck on the bottom.
I mean, I'll adjust you slightly. Jumagulov.
But I also agree that Molina, I think it's just a little bit more well-rounded. I trust his hands a little bit more, and the fights are always going to stand on the feet, start on the feet, I should say. And so I was really impressed with his ability not only to start on the feet, but also take it to the ground if he needed to, adjust himself on the ground. He has decent control when he's on top, and he's definitely striking when he's on top. So I think if Molina gets the opportunity to be on top for whatever reason, whether it's a failed takedown attempt or a reversal or whatever it is, he's going to take advantage of it. So I'm going to go with Molina, and I'm going to go with second round TKO.
Yeah, I'm looking for Molina to shine in this fight as well. I think Jumagulov is a talented guy, but I really am impressed by the record and the stats of Molina. I haven't seen him much myself, but just his record alone, I mean, 10-2 with 8 finishes. I think he's going to be bringing in a lot of firepower into this fight. All right, moving up into the bantamweight division, Tony Gravely versus Johnny Munoz Jr. Gravely, 22-7 as a pro, most recently defeated Simon Oliveira by UD. Munoz Jr., very interesting nickname, Kid Kvenbo. I'm not sure what that means. He is 11-1 as a pro with 7 submissions to his name. So far, 1-1 in the UFC. So, Omar, let me start with you first. What's your take on Tony Gravely taking on Johnny Munoz Jr. in the bantamweight division?
So it's a very interesting fight because Tony Gravely is essentially sandpaper. The man just wants to be up against you, and he wants to wear you down, grind you out, do as much to your body as humanly possible without necessarily standing in the pocket with you. Where on the other hand, I don't know personally who this Kvenbo is. Kid Kvenbo. It seems like he had a fight on the Lewis Gone card. But what I can tell you is that the kid is good at his submissions, and he is good at being able to pull them off. And if he's able to get that against Gravely, that's going to be a big feather in his cap. And Gravely will give him the opportunities to do it because of the positions Gravely is going to want to put him in. It'll be very interesting to see if Gravely changes up his approach and just goes to a striking style and doesn't really try to take him down. I highly doubt that that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure he's still going to rely on his wrestling. But if Kid Kvenbo ends up putting up something that threatens Gravely while he's down in his guard or something like that, it's very possible we see a stand-up fight sooner rather than later. With that being said, I want to go with Gravely just because I've seen this kid fight and I know how he fights, and he's effective, although he may not be the most entertaining. But the statistics here have me messed up with this kid. So I'm gonna go on a long shot here. I'm gonna go with Johnny Munoz Jr. Kid Kvenbo by submission, round 1.
All right, Mark, give us your take. Tony Gravely, Johnny Munoz Jr.
Yeah, Omar might make you feel better. It's not a long shot at all. The odds are pretty damn tight. Gravely is the favorite, but minus 135, and Munoz is plus 110. So very close. But yeah, you kind of laid it out. This is a tough one for a couple reasons. The one, as you said, is that Tony Gravely is a guy who will lean on his grappling to win a fight when he can. But against a submission threat like Munoz, I'm not sure that he can. But then Munoz, on the same note, is a guy who can maybe nullify Gravely's wrestling advantage with that grappling, but I'm not sure he can do much to actually win the fight unless he catches his sub.
Makes sense.
So we just saw Tony Gravely manage to stay safe against an active sub threat in Simon Oliveira. So I think he can, and really what this one comes down to for me is that I think Gravely is just the better boxer. I think he's the more technical fighter, and that he can probably use that to control the fight a bit, because I don't expect the whole fight to take place on the ground, especially if Gravely takes it there and he's like, nah, this is too threatening, I'd rather not be here. I think he can keep it standing if he so chooses, especially because his defensive wrestling is good as well. Mm-hmm. So I will land on Gravely for that reason. It's a tricky fight. I could see Munoz snatching a sub, but I will say Gravely by UD.
Nice. I'm going to ride with you again, Mark. I think I see Tony Gravely outpointing Johnny Munoz and walking away from this fight night with a UD victory. All right, boys, let's move on up to the featherweight division. Damon the Leech Jackson versus Daniel the Determined Argueta. Jackson, 20-4 as a pro with 15 submissions. So far, he is 3-1 in the UFC, most recently defeating Kamuela Kirk. Argueta making his UFC debut this Saturday night. He is 8-0 as a pro, undefeated with 6 finishes. Mark, let me start with you this time. What's your take on the debuting Argueta taking on the very tough and submission-savvy Damon Jackson?
Yeah, so Jackson is actually 3-1 on this run in the UFC. Overall, he is like 3-2-1-1, because his first run in the UFC was a loss, a no contest, and a draw. It will always stick in my head. One of the weirdest 3-fight runs ever. But yeah, also the Determined is a horrible nickname. Were you just going to ask me something? You looked like?
No.
Oh, so Jackson's the big favorite here. He's minus 500. Argueta is plus 375. This one was supposed to be Damon Jackson against Derek Minner, but Minner had to pull out, as Omar mentioned in the Sphere. So instead, we get the LFA bantamweight champion stepping up a weight class on short notice in Daniel Argueta. Ultimate Fighter fans may remember him as Brian Ortega's first pick a season ago. He was upset by the eventual winner, Ricky Tercios, in round 1 of that tournament. But since then, he's won 3 straight. He's still undefeated outside of the Tough House, and I would say he absolutely deserves this shot in the UFC. His only problem here is that he's a wrestler who relies on his grappling, and he's fighting a guy who's bigger than him and who is one of the scrambliers there is. So you never know, but I just don't think Argueta's game is going to work on Damon Jackson. Not only has Jackson looked fantastic on the mat, but he's also added real striking threats to his game lately. Like, he looks like a guy you don't want to be in the cage with right now. He's a tough dude to figure out. So I'm going to go Damon Jackson. I will say Argueta tires up a weight class in a grapple-heavy fight as it goes on, and that Jackson is able to find his neck in the third. So give me Damon Jackson sub-victory. Nice.
Omar?
Yeah, Damon Jackson fights like one of those guys who's not afraid of anybody. He literally just walks forward and, whatever happens, be damned. He paid for that against Ila Topuria, but most people do. But yeah, man, his grappling is very, very legit, and he's not one of these guys that lays on you and preys on you or just tries to get you in some sort of clinch and does nothing about it. Damon Jackson is an active threat every time his hands are on you. And I think that's going to be a real problem for Argueta. Argueta seems to be that exact type where if he gets you down to the ground, he cares more about control than anything else. And Damon Jackson is just as dangerous, I think, from bottom as he is from top. So I think for this fight, especially coming in off the short notice, let alone the fact that he's a size smaller technically, I'm going to go with Damon Jackson. I'm going to go with submission round 2.
We are unanimous, gentlemen. I will also be taking Damon the Leech Jackson. By the way, awful nickname generally, great nickname for a submission guy.
Yes.
Like if he was like a randomly...
Leech is way more apropos for Damon Jackson than it is for Li Jingliang.
Facts.
Is that Jingliang's nickname?
Yeah, the Leech.
Oh, I forgot that. Yeah. If you're not a submission guy, then it's a randomly bad nickname. But if you're a submission guy, great nickname.
Yes. Agree.
Okay, let's go on to the women's strawweight division. Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Felice Herrig. A little bulldog, Herrig, 14-9 as a pro, mostly decision victories on her record. She's riding a 3-fight losing streak coming into Saturday night. Karolina Kowalkiewicz in a similar boat. She's 12-7 as a pro with big-time victories over some big names, including I'm brain farting.
Rose Namajunas.
Rose, yeah, Thug Rose. But she herself is riding a 5-fight losing streak coming into this Saturday night. So both of these ladies looking to get back into the win column. Omar, let me start with you this time. What's your take on Kowalkiewicz and Herrig facing off?
So this is really interesting, right? Because both of these girls have had very tumultuous second halves of their careers. The real kicker for a little bit of trivia knowledge is last time that Felice, the first time that Felice had lost a fight in this little losing streak of hers was Karolina. And the last
time. Oh, you're saying it.
Yeah, the last win that Karolina had was Felice.
Yeah.
So they've both basically been involved with that turning point in their careers that's led them to where they are now. So it's interesting that this fight will sort of, I would imagine, determine the future of one or the other.
Gotta think so.
This seems like it's going to be a loser goes kind of fight. Karolina, like you said, 5-fight lose streak. Felice on a 3-fight lose streak. And to be fair, Felice has had her victories and things like that, but when you start getting to the top echelon of the division, Felice has never really been able to, I guess, win a fight. I wouldn't even say be competitive because she fights. She's definitely in there to scrap, but she's just never able to put one out. So with that being said, these girls have, I would think they have very opposing styles, right? Karolina, although she has a ground game, most of the time she's trying to strike with you, she's trying to stand with you. Kickboxing is kind of her bread and butter. Felice is a little bit more of the ground fighter. She would love to take you down. She would love to get your back. She would love to get your neck. That's kind of where her style lives. On top of that, Felice will still strike with you. She's not really scared to strike with folks, but that's just where her bread and butter is, and I think we could say the same for Karolina's game. It's at the end of the day, it is difficult right now to say what's going to happen, and the reason for that is because both haven't looked very good in their last few fights, and at the same time, their styles, because they haven't looked good, their styles don't really translate well to me having confidence in them getting it done. Karolina's striking as of late has looked rough, to say the least. And Felice's ability to not get her ass beat while she's on bottom has been rough, to say the least. So Mark might have a little bit more in depth as to where his decision is coming from. To be honest, for me, it's very tossed in the air at this point. It really could go either way. Gun to my head, I'm going to go with Karolina. I think she has at least one left in her. I don't really see a long stretch of wins, frankly, for either girl at this point in their career. But I think right now this is Karolina's best shot at a win. So I'm going to go with Karolina by decision.
Okay, Omar's taking Kowalkiewicz. Mark, give us your take on Kowalkiewicz versus Herrig.
You said almost everything that was in my brain. I would just be repeating you if I said the things I was planning to say. But it is interesting because I feel like I don't want to say back in the day, but some years back we used to see the UFC do fights like this, where it was like two people who are maybe washed and they would do like the loser leaves town deal. I feel like we don't see that as much out of the UFC anymore. They'd rather use that vet to take a loss to a newer fighter, to build a newer fighter. So I feel like we don't see these that often. But we're absolutely seeing it here. Rough streaks for both of them. Felice's, yes, she's lost 3 in a row, but it's also been kind of mixed more with that she can't get herself into the cage because of a myriad of injuries, whereas Karolina's has just kind of been like she's been getting drubbed lately. But definitely no positives in the corner of either girl right now, which is crazy because, as you said, there was a time where Kowalkiewicz beat Rose Namajunas, and Felice, while lesser, she beat Alexa Grasso. Like, she has had her wins as well. So
yeah.
It's like you said, though. I don't know how you pick this. Kowalkiewicz hasn't fought in a year. Felice hasn't fought in 2. The only thing I can really grab onto is, and also like you said, it's going to be a style clash. Kovacevic probably looking to strike. Herrig's going to try to drag it down. The only thing I can really grab onto is that Felice, though rarely fighting, has at least still somewhat looked like Felice Herrig to me. Whereas I think Carolina has looked like a ghost and frankly like a girl who maybe shouldn't be in there anymore. So based off that point and that point alone, since I don't know what else you really lean on to pick a fight where they haven't fought and they both look bad and all that, I will flip my coin and have it land on Felice to win a maybe 29-28 decision.
Yeah. I tell you right now, the worst case scenario would be Felice winning by KO, because that would solidify that Carolina needs to know.
Oh God! If Felice ever got a KO, that
No.
that would be the it for Carolina.
Not going to happen. I mean, both of these girls are mostly decision machines. That being said, I agree with both of you guys, and Herrig is the more determined fighter of the two. I think Kovacevic is especially in this latter part of her career. She looks more complacent to me sometimes in the cage. Clearly, I think on paper, Kovacevic is probably the more talented striker. But Herrig, I think she's just going to exact her will on Kovacevic much more. I think Herrig is going to be the much stronger woman in the cage. And I disagree with you, Mark, in that I don't think it's a coin flip. I'm going to say Herrig is going to cruise to another UD victory for her record. All right, boys.
Very possible. That's how bad Carolina has looked. And I just want to say quick, I forgot to say the odds. They're as conflicted as me and Omar were, because they're
really
tight. Herrig minus 125, Kovacevic plus 105. So practically even. But sorry, continue on your way there.
No worries. Let's go now to the co-main event of this UFC fight night in the featherweight division between Dan 50K Ige against Movsar Evloev. Ige, one of the better nicknames in the sport, 15-5 as a pro. One of the most exciting 15-5 records that we've seen. 9 finishes to his name, but he unfortunately right now he's coming off back-to-back losses. Most recently at the hands of Josh Emmett, heavy hitter in the featherweight division. Movsar Evloev, on the other hand, he is 15-0. My man is undefeated with 7 finishes to his name, most recently taking out Hakeem Dawodu. So, Mark, let me throw it over to you first. Give us your assessment of this very exciting and consequential co-main between Ige and Evloev.
Yeah, this is a good fight, and Evloev is certainly getting the respect from the bookmakers. He is minus 400. Ige is plus 300. This is the is Movsar Evloev as good as we all think he is fight. We find out here. And I think that answer is yes. Obviously, we know he's 15-0. No one has really troubled him as of yet. Even his split decision over Nick Lentz never should have been a split decision. And Dan Ige, while incredibly tough and impossible to make go away, is not exactly the most impressive ranked featherweight, in my opinion. He basically only has that ranking because he himself got a sketchy split decision win over Edson Barbosa. You remove that from his resume, it doesn't really strike you as an elite featherweight resume. So frankly, I don't expect this to be that hard for Evloev. Ige's been out-grappled before. We just saw Korean Zombie have his way with him on the mat not too long ago, I think 2 fights ago for Ige. And I don't think there's any reason Evloev can't do the same thing. I don't mean he won't have to work. I'm sure he will. I'm sure he'll get cracked a time or two by Ige, especially considering how sneaky Ige can be with his power shots. But I think that anytime Ige creates that 2 or 3 seconds of excitement, that Evloev is just going to be able to change levels or clinch up or do whatever he needs to do to regain control of the fight. I think that he's too good at implementing his own game, at making people fight his fight, and I think that's exactly what he does here, and I will say he wins a unanimous decision.
Okay, Omar, your turn. Give us your take. Evloev, is he going to wipe Dan Ige, off the face of the mat?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have to agree. I think Evloev is definitely the more grappling heavy fighter, and he's just a lot more adept at using it. I totally see him ducking under punches on a regular basis in this fight, and just blasting doubles and getting Dan Ige on the ground. I feel like Dan Ige will get up from a few of those takedowns, but I think it's going to cost him to get up. I also think that we'll probably see, once he gets up, I think Evloev will probably take that and use that advantage to fake a couple shots and kind of get off on Dan Ige as well. And then as soon as Dan Ige feels like he has, some stand-up moments, he's going to try to move forward, and right back down we go. And I think that's really going to be the story of the fight. It's very possible Dan Ige catches him. Everybody can get caught, but everything on paper, everything that we've seen out of these two, especially recently, says that Evloev should have this in the bag. So I'm going to go with Evloev by decision, and it should be a pretty handy decision.
Yeah, both these guys are exciting fighters in different ways. Evloev is exciting because he's an undefeated guy, 15-0 as a pro. So he's exciting in that sense of like, man, nobody's beating this guy. And so you kind of tune in to see if he's going to lose. You're going to see if he's getting even better and better and better. And then Dan Ige is a much more conventionally exciting fighter, the kind of fighter that fans love, the kind of fighter that promoters love. That being said, I think Evloev at this weight, at 145 pounds, is going to be a much bigger guy in there. And to have a grappling-centric approach, I feel like we're going to all be disappointed in this matchup that we're all excited to see at featherweight, and we're going to see Evloev just kind of exact his will. I think he's going to smother Dan Ige, and he's going to cruise to what will be his 6th consecutive decision victory on Saturday night, and he's going to keep on marching up the featherweight rankings. All right, let's go on to the main event of UFC Fight Night, Volkov versus Rozenstruik, with these two marquee names, Alexander Volkov and Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. So, of course, Volk, 34-10 as a pro with 22 knockouts on his record. He's coming off of a submission loss to Tom Aspinall back in March. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, 12-3 as a pro with 11 knockouts to his record. He is also coming off of a loss against Curtis Blades by unanimous decision back in September. Omar, let me start with you. The big boys are headlining this fight night. What's your take?
Okay, so I would have to imagine that Volkov is still the more technically sound fighter in this matchup. And I would still have to imagine that what you would have thought would have happened between him and Derek Lewis, where he was, be able to pick him apart and work off of his jab, use his movement, lateral movement and things like that, stay away from the right hand, any crazy overhands. I feel like all that still applies for Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Mm-hmm. I feel like losing to Derek Lewis is probably the best preparation that he's going to have to beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik. If he loses this fight, Volkov is probably going to be like the biggest asshole ever. This seems like Volkov's fight to win. It's tailor-made for him to win. Stylistically, I think it works for him. Rozenstruik, I think, is the one who's going to have to work, I think, a little bit more to find that shot. I don't think anywhere in the cards is Rozenstruik winning a unanimous decision of any kind against Volkov. And so if you look at it in that sense, Volkov's only path to victory, if I thought he knew how to do a submission, I would say submission, but his only path to victory is going to be knocking out Volkov. Mm-hmm. And I just think Volkov is way too tall, way too lengthy, and way too technical with that length to allow that to happen. So I'm going to go with Volkov by unanimous decision.
Okay. Mark, give us your take on this heavyweight clash.
So Volkov slightly favored here, minus 160. Rozenstruik is plus 130. This is one of those main events where you get like two big-name top 10 guys, and the winner is obviously going to be right in the mix. But the loser is suddenly going to have lost 3 out of 4. So the stakes are very high for these guys. The loser's not going to be in a great spot. Granted, their losses are all to like the top guys in the division. These are still top guys. But when you're in the title chase, you don't want to be losing 3 out of 4. So this is a big one. They have both had some nice performances interchange with the losses lately. I thought Volkov's win over Overeem last year was really impressive, and same with Walt Harris before that. For Rozenstruik, I thought his last win over Augusto Sakai was maybe the best Rozenstruik we've seen in terms of a complete performance. It's just a matter of which guy's going to be able to deliver in a big spot on Saturday, because they're both certainly capable. But to Omar's point, however it shakes out, I think we will probably see Alexander Volkov winning the majority of the fight. He's the more dynamic fighter. He's the more well-rounded fighter. He's better at winning rounds, period. I think the decision you have to make in picking it is just whether or not you think Rozenstruik can land a kill shot and put Volkov's lights out, because he's likely not going to be winning these rounds. And if he can, I think Volkov mostly works his game and maybe even finishes him in his own way late in that fight as Rozenstruik tires.
Yeah.
But I'm going to trust Volkov here. His losses, other than Derek Lewis, are all to guys that had like a true advantage over him somewhere in the fight. And Rozenstruik doesn't have that. He's going to have to find Volkov's chin. And he can be a sniper at times. He's shown it. But Volkov has handled range really well lately. And other than that one slip-up against Derek Lewis, he's not a guy who's easy to hurt standing. Like, it's kind of easy to forget how tough Volkov is. Like, no one really hurts Volkov other than that one Lewis fight. He's got a great chin. On the ground, different story, but not standing. So while Rozenstruik obviously is capable, I will roll with Volkov here. I think that he even has a grappling advantage if he ever needed to take it there, if he was getting cracked. But I do think it plays out largely on the feet. I think Volkov will look to the body. I think the front kicks are a factor, maybe even short punches in tight or in the clinch. And I think he starts to wear Rozenstruik down and wins a clear decision.
Wow. You're more convicted than I thought you'd be. I am very conflicted on this fight.
I'm not a Rozenstruik guy, so that probably plays into it. But
Neither am I. I'm not as sold on him as I think a lot of other people are.
Tell me again what the odds are.
Tight. Volkov minus 160, Rozenstruik plus 130.
Why aren't you, Omar? Why are you not a Rozenstruik guy either?
I don't know. Maybe I think that at one point I felt the same way about Derek Lewis, in just the sense that he was very sloppy. There wasn't a ton of like technique behind a lot of what he was doing. He was just the guy that knocked people out. And at heavyweight, I feel like that can happen a lot. That's not something that we generally see at lower weight classes. You have a little bit more leeway at the heavier weight classes. But I also think with Derek Lewis specifically, he had a lot of charisma behind him that just sort of made me love him anyway. Like, I just didn't care anymore. And I don't think Jairzinho has that. And like, so I only focus on how he fights from a technical aspect. And he goes in there and if he catches somebody, he catches somebody. But for the most part, if the guy is better than him, there's not really an answer that he has other than just winging and hoping for the best. And I think most people, especially once you start getting to the tippity top of the heavyweight division, I think most people are going to be better than him. And Volkov is one of those guys.
I mean, Rozenstruik is supposed to be this credentialed kickboxer, though.
I mean,
Mark, you were going to say
but
something?
He doesn't. In his last fight, he struck more against Sakai. But normally he just waits and waits and waits. And I that's what frustrates me.
He wants the one hit. He just wants the one hit.
Agree. I feel like he is a perfect like top 10 heavyweight gatekeeper. The only thing that obviously bucked that trend is when he finished Alistair Overeem, which is a hell of a feather in anybody's cap. But he was losing every second of the entire fight until that KO in the 5th round.
It's true.
So I'm just not. Again, I said this even while I picked Volkov. Of course, Rozenstruik can catch him. And the same way I just described about him catching Overeem. It can happen. I can't pick it.
Yeah.
Man, you guys, you're both influencing me, and now I want to pick Volkov. I was going to pick Rozenstruik. But you know what? To keep it interesting, I'm going to pick Rozenstruik. I think Volk's got a lot of miles on that body. He's got a lot of fights on his record. And I think the law of averages is going to catch up. To your point, Mark, he's only really been hurt by Lewis, but Rozenstruik is another guy at the top of this heavyweight division that's got a ton of power in those hands. And I think he's going to have to catch him. He's going to catch Volk, but he only has to catch him once. He's going to hurt him, and I think he's going to finish him. I'll say this is going to go down in the 1st round. Let's go.
Wow.
No way. No